Today, we get to talk to a media influencer. His name is Jeremy Segal. He has grown his social media following over 200,000 followers, and he currently speaks on topics related to community building. Jeremy is the host of Why Influence and the podcast and YouTube channel where he interviews influencers on a wide range of platforms and has more than 1 million followers and subscribers total. Jeremy hosts a weekly virtual meetup via Zoom where influencers and aspiring influencers such as myself and those of you that might be listening get an opportunity to network, break out into rooms, and learn from established guests. So I'm actually really excited to learn about how to grow your social media influence. Jeremy, welcome to the show. How are you, man?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Evan. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to the conversation we're about to have.
You bet, man. So when you first started growing and developing into social media, obviously we all start with zero and grow from there. What made you decide that your niche was going to be learn how to grow social media platforms?
Yeah, good question. So when I say I've grown over 200,000 social followers, I've actually done that for my business, and I've done it completely behind the scenes. So anytime I was in a picture or video, I would edit myself out. I was very intentionally just never present in the whole social media realm for my business. It was all just based around the business, which I feel like, held me back from being able to tell stories or to get more out there. So more recently, I've been self-developing to try to put myself out there in front of that audience. So the topic for my podcast and talking to all these influencers is really about, trying to overcome my barriers to sharing. It's a very big self-development push for me to overcome the barriers that are necessary for me to be more comfortable being in front of so many people and getting my message out there.
Well, perfect, man. So you have talked to a lot of social media influencers, from podcast hosts to YouTubers. What are some of the general themes that you see in your conversations that you can advise on? So basically, let's give me advice. Give Evan Herman advice here. So okay. I have my main energy and focus goes into the podcast, okay? And so that's where I really push and try to get listeners. That's where a lot of my focus goes. And I put these Zoom calls up on YouTube. I don't pay much attention to my YouTube channel other than having videos posted there. I post roughly 3 to 4 times a week, but I'm not doing anything to try to grow it. So right now I think I have like 43 or 49 subscribers. I'm not developing or loving that community. So if I came to you and I said, what do I need to do starting today to start growing that? And to get, let's say my first goal is to 100 subscribers, and then my next goal is to 1,000 and then 3,000. What are some of the themes that you've seen from some of these amazing influencers?
Yeah. So I'll give you advice down that, but just as a precaution, I would at first question whether that's the right choice for you, because, creating content online and creating platforms is a lot of work. And you can pretty much put unlimited work into one platform. Like if podcasting is your main platform, like you could literally have twice as much work done on your podcast, or 10 times as much work done on your podcast, and still have more work you could be doing. So it's easy to get distracted to be like, hey, I've got my podcast going, like I want to switch to other social medias and push on there. So the first thing I'd question you is just making sure that you're making the right decision, putting that kind of energy into a whole nother social platform that you haven't done up to this point, and making sure that you feel comfortable keeping up with at least what would make you happy with your podcast. So assuming that you had a good system down and you're happy with how your podcast is going, you don't really need to do much more there. You just have to stay consistent, and you have the bandwidth to then explore YouTube. Then, I would definitely suggest, a lot of optimization kind of things. Like I was poking around your YouTube channel before this, and some things that come to mind are, your channel. Like if you go to your channel page, the artwork they have as the background, the video that is there when someone new lands on that page, having something that is very welcoming and asking people to like, hey, this is what this channel is about. And here's what you can get out of it. Consider subscribing, some kind of call to action on that homepage. So that would be one thing, because if people stumble on a video, the next thing they're going to do most likely is either subscribe from that video, or they'll go into your channel. And then once they go into your channel, if it doesn't look set up right, maybe they won't think you're as consistent or established on YouTube. So that would be one thing, is just initially set up everything. And then I looked at your videos. I thought you did a good job, doing keywords and hitting the right hashtags and things like that. So they're actually SEO'd pretty well. I use a software called TubeBuddy, and it shows me on the side, what keywords you're using and how they're ranking and stuff. So I thought you did a good job with that.
Thank you. I'll tell my producer who does that for me that he's doing a good job.
Yeah. So some other food for thought, these are all optimization things, but really to go from the 40-ish that you're at to 100, you could do that without any of this optimization. Then you could probably accomplish that mostly just by asking. So you could, on the podcast, you could say, hey, you've been listening to me for a while. If you like watching us while we're having these conversations, why don't you come over to YouTube and check that out? That way you've already got an audience on podcast listening, and then maybe they want to consume the same content, but maybe in a visual way. So driving some people over from that. Another is family and friends. Like when you talk to them, just be like, hey, can you just sub on YouTube? You don't have to watch my videos. I just want to get that sub up to 100. That's your goal, right? You only need 60 or 50 more.
Right.
So asking can get you up to that 100. And then if you're trying to go from the 100 to 1,000, I think the optimization stuff is worthwhile exploring. And then there's actually a tactic that someone I was talking to recently shared, where you can actually network on YouTube. And how that works is, you choose, some topics in your niche, and you can actually go on YouTube and search those topics. So let's say yours is real estate, and you want to find people that are sharing on real estate. You just type in something in the real estate topic in YouTube search, and then you can filter by YouTube channels to see what's coming up, and most recent video upload, and do it by date. And as you scroll through, you can see that the most channels that have been active very recently, and look for the small channels. So those channels that are 100 subs and below, and go into those videos that they were just posting, and then leave a relevant comment, and subscribe to the channel. And most channels under 100 subscribers are getting notified of getting a subscriber. They're seeing who's subscribing. And if they see a relevant comment, they'll be like, who is this person? Why they subscribe to my channel? I don't have a lot of subscribers. Every subscriber counts right now. And a lot of times they'll look back at your channel and be like, oh, well, you do stuff similar. You're active. And then they'll leave a comment on your channel and maybe even subscribe back. So it's sort of called YouTube networking. And I think if you spend time doing that, a little bit of time every week, you could very easily just over time grow from that 100 to 1,000 mark through networking on YouTube as sort of a boosting tactic.
Makes sense. That makes sense. Why is social media platforms for business or individuals who are wanting to grow their income important? I think it's most important to add resiliency. You see what happens when COVID hit and how people are losing jobs. The whole industry, everything is shifting around. But if you have a very strong community around you, if you've got this social media following, which is essentially a community, then let's say you lost your job, you're a career person, and you have a corporate real estate job. You'll very easily network and get your way back into another job somewhere else if you have that large community, and you get that through having that larger social presence. So there's that angle. If from a business standpoint, you come to mind more. So, you're going to have more opportunities arise. So for you do real estate, more people that listen to this podcast are going to know that you do real estate. And if they're near you or know people around you, they're going to recommend you. And that's going to help you get, more leads that then can turn into more business. So that just the more that you get known for what you do, it's going to add resiliency and give you more capacity to scale your business and to grow. That makes a lot of sense. So, there's a lot of different ways to use social media. And for our listeners that are listening, what I'm wanting you and myself to take away is, most of us have some sort of platform that we're using probably more so to consume versus contributing to. We might contribute to it a little bit, but probably not in the way that helps grow our brand, our identity, our recognition, our top of mind. And so how do we go from being a person that consumes a lot to being an individual that is a producer? And,
yeah, good. Go ahead.
And then what platforms should we be using?
Yeah, great question. I would say, well, if you're spending a lot of time on a platform, you most likely have learned that platform pretty well. So if you're trying to decide what platform to share on, I think you would probably be well positioned to know if that platform is right for you. Like, is your audience on there? Is your clientele or potential customers, are they on that platform also? So that it's something that you're already familiar with and you're on, it's going to be less of a barrier for you to start sharing on there. But an easy way just to start becoming a contributor, if you're a consumer, is just to start commenting on things. Like, just if you watch a video on YouTube, leave a comment. People are reading those comments and sometimes looking at your channels through that. If you're on LinkedIn, read something, leave a comment. Those comments go much further than hitting the like button. Your network will see those comments and see that now you're a contributor. Even just for leaving a comment on their feed, they're going to see that you left a comment on some post, and they're going to see the comment first, and then they'll see the post that you commented on, sort of showing you as a contributor. So there's easier, lower hanging fruit things you could be doing that doesn't require you to, start a podcast or start a whole YouTube channel or do something very big. You can start with something small. And as far as choosing the platform, I think you have to, know what you're passionate about, like which one would fit what you're sharing, what you're comfortable with sharing. Like for me, when I started my podcast, I was very uncomfortable sharing. So I did a podcast because it was audio only. There's no video component. And, at the time I was so uncomfortable sharing that I was able to re-record myself asking every question and post-editing, for the first couple episodes because I wasn't comfortable with how it was sounding. And for me, that was a much lower barrier entry than to try to do like a live stream where I'm just sitting there hanging out with a bunch of people and being vulnerable and authentic, like right off the bat. That's way outside my comfort zone starting out. So you also got to figure out what you're comfortable with, see like where you can push yourself to get to, and then know that, you can slowly build up and then grow into other things as you keep going.
Right. When I think of social media and how people can use it, there's this idea that, oh, well, I don't want to be a social media influencer. Okay, well, maybe you don't want, to go viral. But if you're a local plumber or a roofing company, what if you started a YouTube channel around your career? And based off of that, you just use that for local marketing. Because, what I'm looking at is, you brought up SEO for my YouTube channel. And one of the things that I haven't done great on is real estate videos or real estate content. I'm going more of a social media influencer, life influencer versus just real estate influencer. Here in the very near future, I'll probably be adding the other component. But what I'm thinking is that, adding the real estate influencer probably won't do much for me other than bring me current business from my local community and make me look more like an expert here and now locally, which inevitably feeds into almost everything else that I do. And so I guess that's another way to look at it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple thoughts there. Well, for your example, just doing what you're doing, it's organically coming up that you're into real estate, like you're a real estate agent. You help sell houses in your area. So even if people aren't engaged with your real estate content, they still know you as living in the city that you live in and being in real estate. So even as you grow and if you didn't share that real estate specific stuff, you can still get leads and still get people referring you just because they know you more, right? Like people get to know you through these podcasts and things, like they'll understand that about you and you can still get that. Obviously you'll get more of that specifically, if that's what your topic is. And I actually host a weekly meetup for influencers, and I've got a couple real estate agents in there. I've got a local real estate agent who has around 85,000 YouTube subscribers, another smaller, more recent channel that with around 1,000 subscribers that come to mind. And I've heard some stories of other real estate channels where like it really does work really well for bringing in leads. So it's definitely something worth exploring, I think, for what you're trying to do. Another sort of response to that is when you're talking about the plumber, and it also applies to your real estate, is a lot of times it's easiest content to create is by documenting what you're doing. Like you don't have to create something new. So for a plumber, if you're going to do a job, just stick your camera on a tripod, like a cell phone tripod, record you doing the work, and then bring it home and throw it up on YouTube and add some voiceover to it. And now you just got some content, and you can upload it to your website if you want, or use it to help market. And that's documenting your process, right? And similar for your real estate stuff. Like if you go through a struggle, share that in the moment. Like, pull your camera out and just be like, hey, this is what I encountered in real estate. It's a struggle, and this is how we work through it. That's a whole piece of content right there that shares value for someone else. And all you're doing is documenting your process.
That's so good. So it's not even trying to come up with something amazing to say, but just documenting your journey, and people get to learn and watch and follow that, which actually comes across way more authentic and personable, I think, than trying to craft a very nice narrative all the time. And I guess you just come off way more real. And so maybe I like that. Maybe I think that might be my new game plan for going into real estate stuff. Well, in terms of creating content, versus, hi, come buy this house. It's so great. Look at it. 3 bedrooms. Versus like, hey, today I'm doing an open house and I'm bored because no one's come in yet. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah, you could do that. You could be like, yeah, it's boring, and share what it's like to do an open house. This is a typical day at an open house. We have 3 people walk in all day and no good leads. Like, that's what it's like. But here, I'll walk you through the house while I'm here. And then now, you shared some struggle, you shared some advice, and you did a little walkthrough. And I don't know, who knows where that can go. Right.
That makes sense. That's awesome. What advice would you give someone who's thinking about joining the social platform of, whether it's YouTube or podcasting, to grow their business?
Yeah. I mean, so my podcast and YouTube channel is called Why Influence, WHY. It's like, why do you want to share? Why influence? And that's the most common thing that comes up is you really have to hone down what your why is. Like, why do you want to have that, platform that you choose on the topic that you choose? Like, why is it so important that you do it? And is that reason good enough? And you should refine that as well as you can. And that why will evolve over time. But the hardest part is starting. I mean, that comes up all the time. Like, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be this. Well, how many videos have you created? Well, I haven't started yet. Okay, well, get started, So the hardest part is starting. And then once you start, the next hardest part is to continue. And if you don't have a powerful enough why, you're not going to push through the barriers that come up. Like, it's a lot of work to keep creating content and putting your stuff out there. And if your why isn't strong enough, you're not going to be pushing through that. So, the hardest part is to start. The next hardest part is to keep going. And then after that, it's all about tweaking and experimenting and trying new things and seeing what works. Kind of is sort of the process that I've seen.
Right. That makes sense. I think the other thing too is people get paralyzed by this idea of perfection. It has to be perfect. And, Gary Vaynerchuk, I think I learned this from him. He says quantity is more important than quality. And, as you do more, you actually will get better, and then you'll have both. And I honestly, like, in terms of my personal podcast, it's started very much just quantity over quality and developing things and systems over time. And so for someone who is struggling with the perfection aspect of this, what advice to break through that ceiling of haven't started it yet? Like,
yeah.
What would be your advice?
Well, first of all, people don't want perfect. They want authentic. They're going to resonate much more if you make mistakes, but you're being authentic than if you're perfect. Like if you jump right out of the gate and you're just perfect, you may not connect with as many people. They're going to see you as someone that's harder to relate to. So being vulnerable, being authentic are big points of that. And a lot of times that can be hard, which is why, I and pretty much most people I talk to really think it's important to figure out your why so you can overcome that. But then you got to figure out a platform that you're comfortable sharing on, or that you can actually push yourself to get to sharing on. Another thing is you can create content, but you don't have to share it. So you can create 30 videos, of you talking to a camera and practicing. And if you don't like any of them, just delete them. Like there's nobody pressuring you to share it or put it out there. There's no one else that's going to look at it if you don't share it. And then if you want to get, some feedback, show it to a couple people that are close to you that you trust. Or if you don't want to share it with anybody that you know, that I've talked to people who have literally started channels, didn't tell anybody in their network about it because they're, it's easier to share with strangers than people you know. So just finding the angle that helps you start sharing that you're comfortable with is one. Figuring out your why, is a big aspect of it as well. But I think people don't want perfect; they want authentic. And if you find something that is resonating with people, there's other people out there who need to hear that message. So it's important for you to think about ways to share that.
Perfect, man. So I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I want to say I want to play a game with you, but it's not really a game. So let's pretend that you and I have never spoken before, okay? And you're looking at my content on YouTube and through the podcast, my website. I want you to say the things that you think I'm doing well at from what you can see, and critique the things that you think I need to get better at. And then we'll have another conversation that goes off of that. And just know that you can hurt my feelings, and I will block you on Facebook forever. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You won't hurt my feelings. Right. I just, I love personal growth. So give it to me.
All right. Well, I didn't premeditate going too deep into your stuff, so I'll do some stuff that came to mind, but you may be doing it well, and maybe I just didn't notice as well. But one thing is alignment across the social medias. If I look on LinkedIn and I look at your podcast website, I don't really see it. I don't remember at least seeing a lot of overlap. Like if I look at your LinkedIn, I should be seeing that you've got this whole person podcast on there. I can't remember if it's there, but I don't recall seeing it there. Another thing is it's much easier to have a single call to action. And you have a lot of options on your website. Like I could go to your blog, I could see your books, I could go to coaching, I can see your speaking, I can see your podcast, I can request to be podcast guests. Not that that's a bad thing to have all those things because you have a lot going on. I would just be wary of having too many choices, because if I'll go to your website and you're primarily pushing your podcast, I would even strongly consider removing the books, removing the blog, removing the coaching, or put all that into an extra drop down and make it so the podcast should be first if that's the most important thing. And right now I see it as, I think it's the third or second to last item on there. So that's a quick review of that, but I wasn't also prepared to have an audit prepared for you.
No worries. I just kind of was curious to what jumped out at you. And so, I think you hit the nail on the head. I probably need to do a lot better job of aligning, LinkedIn and Instagram, and even Twitter. Those are the three platforms I really don't use. I use Facebook and YouTube and podcasting. Like those would be the three platforms. And probably are more aligned. Yeah.
And as an example, like for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I've started, built and sold a business. I've got a business now. I've grown over 200,000 social followers and then I've got like my podcast, which is my self-development, sharing journey to help me grow. And I've sort of rebranded all my personal stuff to be around that. So I've got people that have been coming to my meetup for a couple of months, the very consistent people, and they still don't know I'm an entrepreneur. Like they just think I do this full time. So like, it's all about what you put out there in the appearance that you share. So if you want to be known as this real estate person, try to make it focused on that. If you want to be known for this podcast, try to make it focused on that. And if you want to be both, find a way to sort of merge the two, but to make it like flow well. And
let's talk about that, because so I'm involved in a networking group locally, well, here locally, but it's nationally. And, everyone knows me as the podcast guy. No one knows me as the real estate guy. And some of that is due to just circumstantial, like, because they only let one profession in per group. And I've been a part of multiple groups that haven't passed the threshold of success, that fizzled and fell apart. And so anytime I go to a group setting, I can't be the real estate agent. I have to be the podcast guy. And so,
right.
I've taken that mantle. And then I've also decided, I'm just going to start my own networking group so I can be the real estate guy, because that's how everything gets paid. So how would you go about building both? If you have two things that you're passionate about, how would you go about building both for brand identity?
I mean, I think the simple answer is to be a real estate podcast, right? Like if you're a podcast guy, but your podcast topic is real estate, I mean, there's not much complexity there, right? They're two together. And, you might be tied to your name, and that's fine. But just, as reference, I've interviewed one person who's renamed his podcast 5 times. And it's a very successful podcast. So like, don't think that you're tied to the name or the brand that you have. Like, you had a reason for starting your podcast under the name that The Whole Person Podcast. But if it evolved over time into something else, you don't have to hold yourself back from that. I'm not saying to do it, but just saying it's another option that's out there. And there's,
right.
You can still play in the words too. You could still keep The Whole Person Podcast and just make it a little bit more about the podcast twist. Like every person you interview, you ask them, something about real estate. I don't know. You can have some kind of, real estate tie to it, but you also have a lot of like financial conversations, things that, overlap with real estate. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can sort of bridge the gap between the two.
What would be your idea? Because I also thought about just doing a separate, completely geared towards real estate. Part of me likes that. Part of me doesn't. As an influencer who has multiple interests, I see people try to segment them out. And I think that's one reason why I've hesitated, is because I just feel like segmenting would be much harder than just doing it all together. And what you like, watch. What you don't like, don't.
Yeah, I've seen people handle it both ways, and I've seen people be successful in both ways. There's someone that I recently talked to that has a Maker YouTube video or YouTube channel. It's got around 5,000 subscribers there. And it actually got to a point where it's bringing him enough money to have like a base income from that. And then he recently started a real estate channel, and he started off by just sharing his journey, right? That's the easiest thing to share. So he was studying for the real estate exam in the state. So he was just creating videos for reviewing the chapters for each of the real estate exam for that state. And, it's been growing, and he found that it's working better for him to have those two separate niches, because even for when to post your content, right? Like if you have a maker kind of video, usually people aren't spending time during the week watching those videos. They're watching them on the weekend. So like the release schedule is going to be, okay, let's do weekends for that. Whereas the real estate might be different. Like maybe people want during the week. So the schedule for releasing content could be different. The niches that you're there could be different. And he tried having both in the same, because he does a lot of maker stuff with a house, and he owns real estate and stuff. But he found that it just worked better to split it out. But I've also seen, really a lot of times bigger channels that can bring in multiple angles, but it's because people are there for you, like as a person, like they're there because of you, no matter what you do. And
you're hitting the nail on the head, because regarding social media platforms and everything like that, the YouTube it's just Evan Herman. It's not The Whole Person Podcast. It's not real estate. It's just me. Where the podcast specifically is more so geared towards The Whole Person Podcast, which has its own separate brand identity that I'm currently building. But at the end of the day, I repurpose its content for YouTube for my own brand, I guess. So
yeah.
Interesting.
And it doesn't have to be the same on each platform. So what you're saying could work. Like maybe you leave the podcast as the podcast, and then on YouTube you have your podcast being dumped there, as well as you're creating some real estate videos, and you can just. I mean, the biggest thing is just to experiment. Really, like nobody knows the answers. Nobody knows your audience. Even if your audience is the exact same as mine, and we're doing the exact same topic, there's still different people on the other side of that. On that microphone, and what you do might not work as well as what I do if we did experimenting on our own audiences. So just, experimenting, don't be afraid of doing that.
Okay. Interesting. You've given me a lot of thought here. Where do you see social media going in the future? The benefits, the issues, the struggles with it. What's the future look like in your opinion?
Yeah. I think it adds resiliency, like I said earlier, which is important for careers and businesses in general. I'm a pretty big sort of futurist, so I think that ultimately there'll be like a universal income, and you won't have to be able to afford food, and like life will eventually essentially be free. Maybe not in our lifetime, but eventually. But with social media in our lifetime, I think that if you're a career person, it's going to give resiliency to your job. Like if, for example, like if a company was hiring a leader in the future, or even possibly even now today, they could be looking at, one person who has really researched on the topic, knows it really deeply and would be a great fit, or someone else who is a little bit less of a good fit, but they're known as a leader in that industry. So getting them would also get their whole community to see your company as leading in this whatever thing you're trying to lead in. So social media might influence like the hiring process for bringing on people inside companies. Like they may hire, someone because they have that community that comes with that person. Yeah. It's not just that person.
Well, and I think you're hinting on also social proof. It feels like there's more social proof out there. And as you're saying this, it reminds me of this interview. I've never really watched Game of Thrones by any means, but it was the older sister of Game of Thrones.
I didn't watch it, so I'm not.
Yeah, whatever the older sister is on Game of Thrones, whoever she is in real life, there was an interview that was done where they asked, how'd you get, your role? And she's like, actually, there was this other girl who was competing for the same role, and she was a better actress than me even, but they both asked us a question on how many followers we had on social media, and we were able to show them, and I had significantly more than her, so they went with me.
Yeah.
And I was just like, interesting.
Yeah, so that's true for the media because it directly ties to that, but usually everything else lags behind the media, right? So now you're going to see trends of leaders and companies that are maybe passionate about diversity and inclusion, and the company is struggling with diversity issues. Well, putting someone famous, well known as a leader in their organization on that specific topic that they're trying to be better at is going to be more advantageous. So right. I definitely think it's worthwhile, whether if you're a career person, if you have a business, having that community there helps add resiliency. So I think it's important. I mean, that's why I've been putting effort into it myself too.
That's awesome. Regarding the subject, what questions have I not asked yet of something that you want to bring up and talk about? I mean, we could talk a little bit about my journey and the barriers that I've had to overcome to get to where I am today. If you want to do some of that. Absolutely, I do. Not just yet, though. So okay. What we can do is, we'll just switch gears to that. If we don't have anything else left on the social, we'll just switch gears. So, Jeremy, you were indicating earlier that this was a big experiment for you to grow outside of your comfort zone. And, that's one thing that I really liked about you because you're documenting your journey, much like I am with personal growth as well. And so from an individual who's also on a very similar journey to you, what made you decide that you wanted to go that route with just being vulnerable with people.
Yeah. I mean, I think I always struggled to understand why people are sharing online. I never shared before starting my podcast, my latest share online was 7 months prior on Facebook. And it had one comment from a friend saying, "Dang, you're still on Facebook." So, so I literally went from being someone who never shared online to like, "Hey, I've got a podcast. Like, here's my first episode." And that was after a while of being in a journey. It goes back pretty far, but like when I first met my wife, it was about 8 years ago now. At that time, she was my girlfriend. And her first gift to me was a check to join Toastmasters. So if that gives you any indication of how I was as a communicator. And it took me over 4 years to cash that check. Like I kept that check until I was like ready to join Toastmasters. And at the same time I joined Toastmasters, I joined 2 local mastermind groups. So it gave me opportunities to sort of speak in front of a group, which I was very uncomfortable with. And it gave me opportunity to go to like a mastermind group where I could see that like anytime I shared with people, I was able to help them take leaps in mindsets very quickly. So it helped me realize my voice mattered. So it was a combination of those two that I think pushed me to be like, okay, my voice matters. It matters to share because it's making a difference to people. So I need to get better at this. Like I need to self-develop. So how do I do that? Or how do I keep going and go bigger with it? So that's when I decided to do the podcast and then sort of evolve through that journey. And I decided to interview influencers because, I was torn between entrepreneurs and influencers because I was an entrepreneur at the time. I had already built and sold a business. Like I'm an entrepreneur. But when I'm going into a room of people, I found I'm gravitated most towards the most authentic and vulnerable people. And I feel like influencers tend to be more authentic and vulnerable than entrepreneurs. And then I also think that entrepreneurs are generally more driven by making money versus making impact, versus influencers are more impact driven in general. So those are the reasons why I chose the influencer route, and I wanted to self-develop in that direction. So then I started the podcast, started interviewing influencers about why they're sharing, deep diving into that, learning what their whys are so I could help figure out mine. And then through that, I'm like, I'm getting messages back from other people saying, hey, thanks for documenting your journey. It's inspiring, blah, blah, blah. So then I'm getting feedback, which is helping me keep going. It just sort of kept going through that. So, and then people would challenge me. Like I had someone challenge me, like after I do 30 interviews, which are mostly all audio only, I've got to do a live streamed update episode where I get a friend to interview me on my podcast, live streamed on video. So like, I was constantly pushing myself to get outside my comfort zone. And since then I've done all my interviews live streamed and on video. And more recently I'm creating solo content on YouTube and sharing video on LinkedIn. I've started a community about 8 months ago. So I have a weekly influencer meetup that I host online. And now I'm like having to facilitate like a online Zoom call and bring in guest speakers. And, that's all outside my comfort zone to be like in front of, like we're averaging around 30 people every week showing up, and to have 30 people sitting there looking at me to drive the conversation. Those are all things I'm pushing myself outside my comfort zone. So I'm just continuing down that path, and that's sort of where I am today. But feel free to pry at any of that.
So I was also a part of Toastmasters for a little bit, and I actually quit because I got mad at the group. That's a different story. So was that check dated then, or was it undated?
It was a dated check, but it still worked. It still cashed.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome, because normally the bank doesn't allow, after like, I think a year. So That's cool. In this process, what do you feel like some of your biggest struggles were in becoming an influencer, and even not knowing your why? And then also, what is your why?
Some of my biggest struggles were that I was just very uncomfortable being on video, being online. Like, I was a very introverted person. Like, I usually only interact with a couple people at a time. I moved out of state where I grew up. I'd never really did a good job calling or keeping in touch with people. So I'm just not usually in environments where I have to speak in front, like on stages and stuff, in front of big groups. So it's outside my comfort zone. And so like I had to figure out ways to get myself to be comfortable to start sharing. And that's, I mentioned earlier about how I gave myself permission to re-record myself in my first 3 episodes so I could like ask the question more confidently and concisely in the first couple of interviews that I did in post editing. And then after that, I was like, this is way too much work. I can't keep this up. But it helped me, it was a learning experience too. It's like, this is how I want to ask the question. This is how I want to learn. I tweaked things as I went through it. And then like every 10-ish episodes I did, I completely changed like how I asked questions, the way I was doing it. Like I literally just had a questionnaire in the beginning. And then now I just have a couple of points that I want to drill into and like with no questions tied to it. So like it's much easier and organic to have a conversation when you just have to get a couple of points across. So it's evolved over time. As far as what my why is, I mean, it's been largely self-development. Like I talked to a lot of people who have started like before me and who are making money doing what they're doing or after me. But like I haven't been driven by money to do this. I've been driven by self-development. Like I want to keep growing. I want to keep surrounding myself by people who are doing things much bigger than me, so I can feel inspired by them to be like, okay, well, now I'm surrounded by people that are doing this. It's like normal, right? Like now my network is like nothing but influencers or aspiring influencers for the most part after a year and a half of doing this and community building. So it helps me like, now I can create solo videos on YouTube and all that. And, now I'm getting messages. More recently, I posted a video on LinkedIn. And I was like, creating solo content is still pretty new for me. Like, I'm just trying to I'm glad I'm getting comfortable doing this. And I know that I need to work on my like vocal variety, which is something we talk about at Toastmasters a lot. And right after doing that, I got like 3 private messages from like voice coaches or people who knew voice coaches making introductions and like, hey, here's some introductions that can help you grow in that. So like I'm constantly, trying to grow myself, but like I'm sharing that journey. And by sharing it, it's like getting other people to also push me to grow more or push people in my network who can help me grow more. So sort of, that's my why mostly is just to keep self-developing and building my community. And I don't really know where it's going to go. Like, I mean, I'm not really sharing anything entrepreneurial yet, which I feel like I have a lot of knowledge and wisdom for. So I think that there's probably something else that will come out over the coming years. But for now, like, I'm documenting my journey of, sharing, and then that's going to get some kind of community around me. And then I'll see if I like want to keep it all together or branch out and do like a separate, community for something else where now I'm comfortable sharing in those ways. And then I can share on that other topic. I don't really know where it's going yet, but I'm definitely driven towards self-development still.
Yeah. I very much feel you on that. Also doing this, one of the things that I just want to ask you, what opportunities have taken place in your life that without doing what you're doing wouldn't have happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually a question I ask a lot of my guests. I would say that, obviously the self-development parts wouldn't have happened. And then I got an opportunity to speak on stage. I spoke at a podcast conference and I was able to speak on stage there. And after speaking there, I was super nervous. When I got off stage, like my hand was shaking. Like I tried texting my wife and I made it through it and I can't even read what the text said that I sent. But I made it through it, the speaking event. And like the next day I ran into someone who came up to me and was like, hey, I saw you speak yesterday. And I just want to say that it inspired me to commit to speaking next year at the conference. So I'm going to apply to speak, even though I'm really uncomfortable sharing and speaking on stages.
What conference was it?
That was Podcast Movement.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah.
So it was was it a breakout session?
They had a thing called Ignite. It was sort of like 5-minute mini talks. Like you can, like anyone can apply to. It's not really a breakout session. So it's like they have like a session. They have a big room, and then they bring in like, I don't know, 15 or 20 people that have like 5-minute talks, and then they have like slides that move every 5 seconds automatically. So you have like 12 slides I think it was, or something like that. So it's like a TEDx style talk. So the first time I'm on stage, I'm hearing from other people who are public speakers, like that's like the most stressful kind of talk you could give. Like it's like auto shifting slides every 5 seconds, and it's like a TEDx style talk. So it's probably not a good choice to start with, but yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity to stand on stage in front of people. That was my first time doing something like that. And there was like a audience of like 400 people that I was in front of. That was scary for me.
That's cool. I'll have to apply for that after, COVID. I didn't realize that. I'll have to talk to Jared about that. You know who Jared Easterly is, right?
Yeah. He's one of the founders.
Yeah. So in addition to this podcast, the Whole Person podcast, I have another one called The Podcast Community. And that's done with a friend of mine named Seth Silvers. Also, hey, join the podcast community. It's a Facebook group page, but it's geared towards podcast learning and growing, much like Podcast Movement. But it's more so for people who are already doing podcasts and trying to learn how to monetize and grow. And so we have a podcast surrounding that in the Facebook group. And Jared was one of our guests on the show. And Jared's a blast, man.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, that was one opportunity that came up. I would say like, I'm now starting to get like, private messages every once in a while. Like, I'm sharing on Instagram, on LinkedIn, I send email blasts, I send a little bit on all the platforms, and like, I'll get private messages saying like, from people that never liked or commented on anything. And they'll just be like, hey, I've been watching your posts and great job, but keep up the good work. And it's like, this person hasn't hit like or comment. And so you never know who's looking at your content. There's a lot of things. There's a friend that I haven't talked to since high school who messaged me, and we caught up. We had a phone call for like an hour and a half, just catching up on life. And it's like, I haven't talked to this person since high school, and it would have never happened if I wasn't sharing online. Like I was a silent person before that never came into people's minds because I just wasn't sharing anything. So it's reconnected some old friends, just a lot of stuff, I think. And
That's
then
awesome.
With my business, like I'm able to now, like I've done a handful of videos and content over there. Like on the first time I put myself on Instagram on that Instagram, just saying like, hey, like I'm Jeremy from this company, and like here's an update. Like it was like a 10 to 15 second clip. It got like 9,000 views in 2 days. So it was like the first time I ever put my face on Instagram. This was before I did it on my podcast. Like, I got 9,000 views in 2 days. It's scary to think about. But,
dang. So. I can't pay $400 and get 9,000 views.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, then I've created a handful of YouTube videos, and, I was very uncomfortable sharing over there. I would have never done that before the podcast. So definitely stuff like that.
That's awesome, man. Let's jump into your entrepreneurship, because, the Whole Person podcast, it is related to business, faith, family, finances. And regarding business, what areas of entrepreneurship in your life have taught you the biggest lessons, both from your successes and failures? And what were those lessons?
I mean, I think it is synonymous almost with like the whole influencer stuff, but it's like, you just got to get started with something. So like I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, and I've always been driven to be an entrepreneur from a young age. And I saw us being a CFO of a company as being the skill set that I felt was necessary to be a good entrepreneur. So I've always been driven to be a CFO of a company. So like, I don't know, back in middle school, I was buying and selling Pokemon cards, and, I would take pictures of stuff at Walmart and sell them on eBay. And when they sold, I'd get my parents to drive me to Walmart to buy what I sold on eBay. Like I was drop shipping back before drop shipping. Like, I was just entrepreneurial mindset, right? So like, and then I've started a bunch of websites that got the first page of Google back when you can like hack SEO. But all this I never gave myself permission to be an entrepreneur because I wanted to be a CFO. So I never really saw those as me being an entrepreneur. And then I was able to land a CFO job when I was 25. So I was pretty young. It was about 130 employee medical practice. So I had direct reports. I was the CFO of a company. Like, we did change management. I had to hire people. Like, there's a whole experience. Like, and I learned a lot real fast. And then after that, I was like, okay, like I've been a CFO. Let's start a business. And I started a business as an e-commerce drone accessory business. Over 2 years, I built it up. And then exactly at 2 years, I put it for sale and sold it in 30 days. So I went through the whole process of starting business, building it up and selling it before I was 30. And then started another business. It's a car dealership. I import classic Japanese sports cars into the US. So that's what the 200,000 social followers is for there. And I've had that for, I don't know, 6 years now or so.
How old are you?
33.
Okay. You're 1 year older than me.
Nice.
So, wow. So that's cool, man. You import classic Japanese cars and that's cool. You don't hear that too much.
Yeah.
So is that your sole business?
Roughly. I mean, I do some cryptocurrency mining, and then I've got the podcast stuff, and that's mostly the big stuff right now. There's some things in the works, but nothing, moving on the other things.
Right.
But yeah. So for the cars, in the US, there's a 25-year exemption rule for emissions and safety. So once a car is 25, you can import it and legally have it in the US. So we import the classic, like Nissan Skylines, Toyota Supras, like, the Fast and Furious kind of cars.
Yeah. No, those are cool cars.
Yeah, thanks. And then the cryptocurrency mining is just another business. We built a 10-foot shipping container full of computers. So put 320 GPUs that were all mining Ethereum. And built like a modular mining rig.
Oh, okay. You don't have to give a specific location, obviously, but like, where do you put something like that?
We had it in our car dealership, actually. So we had a warehouse. It's basically treated like e-commerce. Like, most of our sales are out of state for the cars. Like, we sell them, and then the transport takes them away. So we have just a warehouse, and we just have the container inside the warehouse. We had the space.
Man. So that's something that I thought about doing 3 or 4 years ago, is having a computer built to do cryptocurrency mining. I just don't understand it. And the people that I looked at who would build it for me were going to charge me like $3 or $4 grand. And I'm just like, oh man, like it would take me about 2 years of mining to pay this off. And a number of things could break on this between now and then. And I have no idea how to fix it.
Yeah, it's definitely like when we started that, we started making rigs thinking it could be a product, right? Like a 8 GPU rig, like it's a big case with a big motherboard, and it has 8 risers on it. So you can have 8 powerful graphics cards running. And we sold a couple, but when we sold them, we always had to set them up for people and then tweak them. And then there's like ongoing, follow-up that comes. And if we shipped a couple out, and it's like, well, if it shows up and it doesn't work, they got to ship it back. It was a nightmare. So we were like, okay, well, let's go bigger with it. Let's see if we can build something bigger and maybe sell it to companies. And that's why we built the container. Started exploring that. And then it was like, did that for a while. And then we tested, the market sort of went down a little bit. And so we saw an opportunity to liquidate it, to test the liquidation capacity, the capability for GPU mining versus ASICs. And because if ASIC application specific miners, a lot of times like Bitcoin miners, once they are outside profitability, they become worthless. Like they're just computers worth nothing. You can't sell them. But GPUs you can liquidate, and they're still worth something to gamers. So we actually sold all the GPUs from it. And then so now we've like got the media we've built it, we've shown proof of concept. And now that the market's sort of picking up again, we're trying to talk to investors about trying to build a larger farm kind of thing. So that's sort of where that project's at. If
you can get me a good deal on my own single unit, we can talk after the fact.
All right. Yeah.
Well, man, Jeremy, I like to end each show with the same 3 questions. And the first question is, in your life currently or in the past, what have you struggled with in terms of negative self-talk?
Yeah. I would say it's the giving myself permission. Like that's held me back. Like I was never an entrepreneur until I gave myself permission to be an entrepreneur. And I think that if I didn't have that mental blockage, like I have to be a CFO of a company to be an entrepreneur, I could have started like a legit business at a much younger age. So I think that held me back. And similarly with the whole influencer thing, like if I gave myself permission to have a voice, gave myself permission to, speak up and put myself out there, I'll be in a different position from a personal brand standpoint and just in general, just opportunities and stuff. So I think, if there's something that you're struggling with, a good way to overcome it is just to give yourself permission to overcome it.
That's good. What's the best decision you've ever made?
I would say so many good decisions. I mean, I think that it's hard to say, hard not to say marry my wife. And,
right.
She's a pretty amazing person.
All right. So what's the second best decision you've ever made?
I would say when I started my career out of college, I started a big accounting firm. I started at Ernst & Young, and I realized it wasn't taking me down the path I wanted to go down. And just from an opportunity standpoint and learning real world knowledge. So I decided to actually leave that job without a job lined up as a new person out of, I was like 7 months into that career. Regardless, despite everyone telling me not to, like, it doesn't make sense, don't do it, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, I have enough money to live to the end of my lease that I've saved up. So I'll just, figure it out. I've got a couple months. And I think that was a good decision because, I think about how my life would be if I didn't make that jump, especially that early on. Maybe I wouldn't have been a CFO at a young age. So then I had to wait longer to be an entrepreneur. And then I'd be longer to figure out my voice matters and all that. So I think that was a good catalyst. So like sometimes you have to ignore other people's opinions and just trust that things will work out when you make decisions. And I think that was a big one for me.
What brings you peace?
I like nature. I like traveling. So disconnecting. I like being in deep nature and disconnecting. Like for my honeymoon with my wife, we actually spent 2 weeks in Botswana in Africa, and like got on rented a fully equipped 4x4 with a tent on the roof and just like did our own safari. And like we didn't have cell signal, didn't have, we're in the middle of nowhere, could be eaten by everything. And I really liked that. It was just a huge disconnect and it was deep into nature. So that brings me peace for sure.
That's awesome. Before that, have you been to Africa?
No.
So, okay. I've been to Uganda twice and we stayed in a safari area, and I had 2 oh shit moments. In the wild nature area reserve, the bush is what they call it. And so I'm walking around our hut from the backside up to the front, and then all of a sudden there's a wild boar staring at me. And if you're listening and you're like, oh well, it's just a pig, like these pigs have gigantic husks on their snouts and they're vicious. Like they will attack and kill you. And I'm standing there, and then all of a sudden its hair starts racing off. It starts panting and it starts like digging its foot like it's getting ready to run. And I'm just like, oh shit. And right then the team leader from our missions trip team came around the other side and saw this, and he had a soccer ball with him. And so he put it on, he dropped the soccer ball. He was a soccer player, kicked the ball and hit the boar in the side and scared it and ran it off.
Wow.
And then my other oh shit moment was, probably within a day or so of this. And it was so dumb. Like this is the dumbest decision that I think I made, but it was really kind of cool at the same time. There's this like little dirt road with a whole bunch of brush, and it was in front of our hut. And so I'm like, the bushes are rattling. I wonder what's back there. So I just decided to go walk through the brush, and I stepped through it, and within feet of me is a gigantic wild elephant with a herd of elephants. And I just looked and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
Could die right now. And then, you know that meme on Facebook of Homer Simpson walking cautiously back into the bush?
Yeah.
Literally, that was me, like, slowly creeping back to the bush on the other side of the road.
Yeah, it's no joke out there. You can die around every corner. Like, there's so many things. Like, when we first got there, we did a mistake of going to look at a reptile museum, and the reptile museum was just basically the place where when they call and say, hey, can you get this out of my house? That's where they bring all like the venomous and poisonous stuff. So we get this tour and they're like, oh, this snake, it can shoot acid in your eyes and blind you. Oh, this snake, it bites you and then crawls in your eyeballs and eats you from the inside. This one, oh, it can bite you on the leg and just rip a chunk out. Oh, this one, like, this is nonstop, like how each one could kill you and like how easy it is to die. And it's like, welcome to Africa. That's like our first day there. And it's like, we're about to do this whole safari where we don't even have any kind of communication with anyone. We're going to be in the middle of nowhere.
Well, at least you knew what was dangerous. That way you could avoid.
Yeah.
Oh, it was, yeah. Loved it though. I bet you loved it.
Yeah, it was, nothing's more real than like we camped in the Okavango Delta, which apparently they just found the oldest human there recently.
How old?
It was older than the one in South Africa, and now South Africa is like trying to fight it, saying like that's not real. Like, we want to own the rights to the oldest human. So like, I don't know the current status of that situation, but I don't know. I don't even know how many millions of years, but many millions of years.
Wait, you mean
like remains?
Remains. Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking of a live person.
No, sorry. I realized that after I saw your face.
Yeah. I'm thinking like, we want to own the rights to a person, South Africa. Really? That's slavery. Like, I thought you had the apartheid. Like, we're done with that. Anyway. Right. Awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Before we go, plug what you're doing and where people can find you.
Yeah, thanks. I'd say if you found a message that resonates with people and you want to go bigger with getting that message out there, there's other people out there who need to hear that message, and if you don't share it, then they're not going to hear it. So I think it's important that if you find something that resonates, that you go bigger with how you're sharing. And some ways to do that is, I interview influencers all the time on my podcast. It's called Why Influence, WHY Influence, and deep dive into how they grew into the person they are today, what barriers they overcame, things like that. And then I also have a weekly meetup. So if you go to my website, whyinfluence.com, WHYinfluence.com, in the community tab, you can join, the email list for that. I just send out a Zoom link every week. We do a weekly meetup and we bring in guest speakers or just network and things like that. So it's all about helping to lift you up and grow your influence.
That's awesome, man. Well, Jeremy, it was a pleasure having you on. Learned a lot about what I can do currently in social media and branding myself a little bit better, man. Thank you so much for coming on today. I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much for having me.
Take care.
Thanks.